The Belt and Road Initiative is China's President Xi Jinping's signature foreign policy initiative. Launched in 2013, it comprises an overland belt stretching through China, Central Asia into Europe, and a maritime road stretching around Southeast Asia through the Indian Ocean and up past East Africa. So a benign way of characterizing China's Belt and Road Initiative would be infrastructure for influence.
So when Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative, shortly afterwards China designated Pakistan as its showcase flagship project. So the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was going to be the biggest and most important showcase for the success of the Belt and Road. Pakistan is in great need of infrastructure development. They wanted to create a railway, a highway, roads, all kinds of economic development that is intended to help Pakistan. And it's meant to provide jobs, 2.3 million jobs for Pakistanis. It's meant to provide a 2.5% boost to GDP growth.
And China would gain economically as well. CPEC was intended to reduce oil and gas routes from the Middle East by thousands of miles, a way to cut overland into Western China instead of going around Southeast Asia by ship. Projects in Pakistan also provide Chinese state-owned companies with an additional market. Chinese workers are brought to Pakistan to build infrastructure and then take wages home. CPEC is also strategically significant for China and Pakistan. China wants to strengthen this relationship to counter their shared rival, India.
CPEC is both an instrument of Chinese power as well as a test of Chinese power. If it succeeds, China will be demonstrating that it's able to do what great powers have not been able to do in Pakistan, including the United States.
Which is why Gwadar is so important. It's in Pakistan's Balochistan province, an area with serious electricity and water shortages.
Balochistan province is actually populated by people who are of Baloch origin. They're a different ethnicity, they speak a different language from the majority in power in Islamabad. And they feel, as the poorest province in Pakistan, they have not sufficiently benefited from some of the economic achievements that the rest of Pakistan has had. That area is quite contested by the Balochistan Liberation Army, the people who feel that even Pakistani people have encroached into their territory. So quite a number of people are still staging attacks, and they attacked the biggest international hotel in Gwadar, shot up the lobby and killed, I think, 5 people.
But this unsettled city is where the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is supposed to lead to. Authorities plan to develop Gwadar into an international port city.
Gwadar Port has an interesting history and an interesting location too. It's located in Balochistan. It's about 120 kilometers from Iran. Pakistan purchased this territory from Oman, I think in the 1950s. And so for a long time, Pakistan has had on its agenda trying to develop this area. Since the 70s, it's wanted to build a port in Gwadar. Actually approached the United States in the 1970s and tried to convince the Nixon administration to pay for a port. Even offered naval access if the United States was willing to pay for that.
The US rejected Pakistan's offer, concerned that the port would not be commercially viable and would cause geopolitical tension. But in the early 2000s, a Chinese company was awarded the contract to build the port, and they completed phase 1 of construction in 2006. The port was then managed by a Singaporean government entity. In 2013, a Chinese port operator took over from the Singaporeans. In 2015, China announced that it will expand the port as part of the CPEC initiative, but 5 years later, little has happened.
When you look out at the port, you can see it has only 3 berths, and all of them were empty. And the only ship that was in the port at the time was a Pakistan naval frigate. And so it indicated to me that the port is not particularly operational for commercial purposes, and a number of analysts have talked about the strategic importance in a military sense if eventually China were able to use the port of Gwadar as a military base.
no one would be surprised if China did use it in that way. I don't think in the short term, like it is set up in Djibouti, where it has a permanent base. I think it's more likely to use it as almost like a sort of forward-based resupply option, something it can use when it wants to.
Other projects, like building Pakistan's largest airport in Gwadar and 2 special economic zones, have been delayed. A 19-kilometre highway linking the port with the Makran Coastal Highway in Balochistan is under construction too.
Most of the people who live there and work there already are fishermen. They rely on access to the sea. The way that the express highway from the port was originally proposed would have cut off their sea access, and so that was a real point of contention with the community. There have been some proposals to allow them an underpass. It's still a little bit unclear how that is finally going to be resolved.
Even if those projects are eventually built, there are serious questions about who will work there.
There is a problem with manpower, of course, in Gwadar. It's a very small city, and so one proposal has been, well, we'll just ship Chinese workers in from China and build lots of fancy housing for them.
The first Chinese-built community in Pakistan, a $500 million development spanning over 10 million square feet, with over 60% open spaces. And
that kind of proposal is what makes a lot of the Pakistani local people quite upset.
A Gwadar-based journalist expressed concerns to Bloomberg over projects like this. The journalist spoke anonymously for fear of persecution from the Pakistan government.
These projects are creating jobs, but they're not really creating jobs for the local people of Gwadar. They're not against economic prosperity, but they're against the development that leaves them behind.
Pakistan doesn't have the money to build these projects. It's gone to the IMF for its 13th bailout since the 1980s. By engaging in CPEC projects, the government of Pakistan has incurred more debts from China, not only posing challenges for Pakistan, but possibly the international community if Pakistan eventually defaults on its debts. But CPEC is still set to go on. Even if most current projects haven't been completed, the two countries have recently signed new projects worth $11 billion. Pakistan's Prime Minister said the country's economic future is linked with China.
It's hard to imagine how the China-Pakistan economic corridor is going to be the game changer that the Pakistan government would like it to be. We're not seeing the economic growth or benefit from the projects that were set out and we're supposed to have seen by now. We're not seeing the job creation.
Project delays, accumulating debts, commercial viability. These problems of CPEC are also typical of Belt and Road projects around the world.
For China, though, it's never the narrow accounting perspective that matters. It's the bigger strategic benefits. As China's dollars continue to flow, as China's concrete continues to pour, China's influence continues to increase.